This video is a continuation of the variables notebook and will discuss assignments in R. We've seen several examples like this one, where we bind an integer, 4, to a variable name, x. And of course, if we output the value, we see that x is 4. Assignments in R allow us to bind objects, like the integer 4, to a name so that we can recall or reuse that object when needed. You may note that in previous videos, examples, or even elsewhere, that assignments like this are described by saying that the variable x on the left stores or contains the object or data on the right-hand side. And this is really a simplification of what's going on. In R, the object on the right is actually created and stored internally by the interpreter, and the name or variable on the left is added to a symbol table and bound to the object on the right. Now you may think, why do I care, or what's the difference? And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves in this topic, but at this point, I'm going to say that once you start to understand this concept, then you're going to be better at estimating how your code should perform and how much memory it'll actually need or use. You will even be able to avoid, say, copying data when you don't really need to. And we're going to come back to this in more detail once we start talking about data structures. But for now, just know that variables don't actually store or contain data. Instead, they're really just convenient names or maybe handles for us to access and modify the various objects that we create in our code. And we use the assignment operators to bind those variable names to those objects. And now, if you recall, or if you've read the paragraph here, there are in fact several assignment operators, and that the operators look like single or double arrows that allow assignment to the left or to the right. So we can write an expression like 3 plus 5, and then use the right arrow to assign the result of that expression to a variable y, just like so. Also, the single equals operator can be used for assignment similar to other languages. However, I do want to point out that this one only assigns the result of expressions on the right-hand side to variables on the left-hand side. It does not go the other direction. And by and large, these operators are interchangeable. However, there are certain contexts where this is not necessarily true, and I've given you a link here to a nice discussion on Stack Overflow that describes this. In general, though, the R community tends to use the single left arrow for assignments, and I'm going to try to stick to that as much as possible within these notebooks. So there is another way to make an assignment without using these operators, and that is using the assign function. This is a bit different since to make this work, we need to pass the variable name as a string, as well as the value to be assigned. So let's say I wanted to assign the floating point value of 7.6 to the variable g. I would do the following: assign, and then g as a string, comma, the value 7.6. And then if I were to run this function, the variable g would actually be created and assign the value 7.6. So if I output g here, you'll see it has the value 7.6. And this variable can be used just as any other variable.